I'm Tim, the Brand Weaver, and this is Branding for Breweries, the podcast that helps you grow your brewery, build a better brand, and connect with more drinkers. Each week, I'm joined by the brightest minds in the beer world, sharing practical tips to help your brewery stand out and sell more beer. Let's get stuck in. What up, 24-hour party people? 'Tis I, Tim the Brand Weaver, and again, you join me for Branding for Breweries. Oh, yes, for Branding for Breweries. I almost forgot the name of my own show. Well done, Tim. It's been the weekend. I need more coffee. But nonetheless, Branding for Breweries, the show that brings you the brightest minds around the globe to help your brewery thrive and survive. And as I always say, today is no exception, as I am joined by the dashing, handsome, intelligent, and all-round good guy, Richard Lloyd Williams from Flavor Sampling. Now, Richard caught my eye on LinkedIn because he was talking about sampling in ways that I'd never seen, experienced, or encountered before in my life. You know, my extent of knowledge, I'm not afraid to say, was pretty much limited to those random annoying people who throw really tiny cans of Diet Pepsi in your hands at certain festivals and events or in the middle of town. But Richard actually went in depth and talked about all these other areas. And I was like, I've got to get Richard on the show. There's got to be so much that you guys and girls can learn from him. So we're going to be talking about sampling, right? How to get your beers into the hands of your target market through sampling. It's going to be a hoot. If you've tuned in live, feel free to add questions and comments in the chat feed. We'll try and get to them as and when we can. Beyond that, if you're listening to this in the future, enjoy. Now, without further ado, Mr. Richard.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Rich. How's it going, buddy?
Yeah, good, man. How are you?
I am super funky fresh, if not lacking in enough caffeine, as I established in the intro of this one.
Coffee is important.
Can't even say the name of the show, which is a really great start to the chat. Rich, thank you so much for joining me today. I've been really looking forward to this conversation because I'm not afraid to say sampling is an area that I really know very little about. But by the end of this wonderful 30 to 40 minute conversation, I hope to be educated, as I'm sure everyone.
You won't need me at the end of this. Hopefully, I can give you everything.
Amazing. That's what we want. If you can just null and void yourself by the end of this conversation, it really benefits my listeners. So thank you so much. I suppose before we get stuck in and you start telling us about sampling and how to do it properly and effectively, would you mind just giving us a short little intro as to who you are, what Flavor Sampling is all about, and how you got into this crazy world?
Yeah, of course. It's called, we call it actually the dark art of marketing in a way, especially for food and drink. It's always been there. It's ever present, right? It makes sense. Sampling works. You try something, you like it, you're more likely to go and buy it. Not rocket science. But my background was actually in experiential marketing. So anything at live events, festivals, shopping centers, stuff like that. And sampling back in the day sat underneath that little prism, I suppose. So what I saw is lots and lots of sampling campaigns that were done, as you had described actually, with very little targeting, very little kind of thought, a bit of a bolt on, but I kept on seeing that it worked to a degree. So where Flavor came from, it's myself and my friend, we've known each other since we were 17, Kurt, both worked in different areas of experiential marketing. Decided that there was probably a better way at looking at sampling from a more strategic point of view. So more targeting, more measurement, more thought out process around how and where and why you should get products into people's hands and just build it up from there.
Amazing. So with the audience who's listening here, obviously brewery owners and people in the brewery sector, why should they be caring about sampling when I can imagine the first thing that they're going to be screaming out is we've got to give away some of our beer for free? Come on, we're struggling to make a profit on it as it stands. But what's the benefit to it?
Well, it's a good point. I'm not a brewery expert, but I am a sampling expert. So like I look at it through quite a simplistic point of view, I suppose. But sampling ultimately, especially with alcohol actually, is probably the single most effective way to convert because you know, it is kind of expensive from a product point of view, but there's nothing more likely going to get someone to actually buy your product than when they have tried it. So if you have that as a basis and that's an accepted point of view, then the next step is just saying, right, how can we do that as effectively from a cost point of view, but also in an engagement and conversion point of view as possible? Because ultimately what people are doing is they're building trust when they try something. There's some hesitation around all sorts of things when you've got food and drink. Is it good for me? Is it worth the cost? But as soon as you taste it, that's the fundamental that people really want to know, and whether they know ultimately whether they're going to like it or not. So ultimately, if you're confident enough in the taste of your product, which most food and brand products managers are, to be honest, then sampling is going to work.
Okay, and is that what we've talked about in the past, is the idea of liquid-to-lips battleground? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a well-used term in the booze sector, I suppose, is liquid-on-lips, but it's all about just trying to get people to have that taste, that first sip, that first kind of acclimatization and verification that you do like that product, or that product is better than a competing product. And that's what it's all about. You know, marketing through many spheres is about that, trying to convince someone that one thing is better than the other stuff that they've already buying. And when it's not physical, it's very much trying to lean on those emotional levers or those value drivers. But when it is actually the product, it becomes experiential. It becomes that thing that you are trying, which builds that trust, but also that love, that kind of authenticity around what the product is.
And like, you know, we see a lot of big brands do sampling and do sampling well. And I would assume that's because they have the budget in which to do it. Are there other things that, you know, enable a big brand to do it more successfully than like smaller independent brands?
It's a good question. I mean, yes, because budgets, you know, you do get scale, and with scale comes efficiency, and with data and mass amounts of data becomes more precise understanding of the audience and how you manage it. But ultimately, where big brands focus is that they see sampling as strategic, I suppose. So it's a part of their marketing mix, and it makes sense it's a part of their marketing mix. So they're really not thinking of it as a giveaway and handing out product and free stuff. That part of the cost is an investment into their whole marketing campaign. And that's really how they look at it. And this is probably how I'd advise your listeners to think of it in the same way. There is going to be a cost to it, but it's all just about thinking, what value am I going to be able to get out of it? And what value and likelihood to purchase or recommendation, or just from a brand awareness or affinity point of view, are you going to be able to get the customer to have by trying it in certain ways?
I suppose in many ways it's a similar mindset to if a brewery were to put a 12-pack in the post to a content creator. Like there's a cost to that, but what you're hoping is there's a return where people become aware of the brand and they buy the brand. It's the same thing,
Yeah,
isn't it?
absolutely. I mean, that is sampling to a point. It's sampling to that influencer and then getting that influencer to talk about it. That's recommendation on an elevated scale, I suppose, by utilizing them as media. But ultimately, you're still convincing them, unless you're paying for them, obviously, but you still got to get them to authentically talk about your product in a positive way. And the only real way that they can do that is to try it. It's the same way I invest in a few startup food and drink brands as well. And the first thing that they always do is, let me send you something. And you think of it from that point of view, you're going to try and capture that person's attention and interest, who's going to give you money, ultimately, hopefully, by getting them to try the product and vote with their taste buds.
Is it kind of a bit of a hack, or not a hack, sounds dirty, but a bit of a cheat? Because, you know, my perspective is I talk about the 2-pint rule a lot, which is the first pint is based on branding and marketing, like awareness of the brand and stuff. And the second one is based on the taste of the product. But through sampling, you can almost bypass the needs and efforts of a lot of branding if the product is good, of course. So
yeah, no, it's really true. I mean, I'd hesitate to say that definitely. That sampling has often been seen in the past as kind of those, you know, a tool for those last 6 yards, getting people to go from consideration and awareness all the way through to actually purchase. And it can be really useful as that. But when you look at it just as part of your marketing mix, a fundamental element that sits throughout it from an awareness point of view and those consideration points, you can't necessarily get someone to buy it straight away, but it's a really effective way of being able to get your product into their minds and get them to understand more about who you are and what you're offering.
So how can breweries approach this strategically? Because there must be if I were doing this as a brewery owner, I'd be going, well, yeah, everyone wants a bit of free beer, like, but how do
Yeah,
I make sure they get to the right drinkers and the people who are more likely to actually buy it afterwards?
it's a really good point. I think from a scale point of view, and if you don't have the big budgets, you've got to think smarter, really. So think quality of contact rather than the quantity. Think about where the audience is that's going to be the ones that are ultimately going to buy you. Do you know that from a beginning point of view? I'm sure you talk about that a lot from a marketing aspect, but really understanding who the guys are that's going to buy it. And then think about, we talk about this and refer to this a lot from a flavor point of view. It's kind of one of our focuses, is targeting the moments just as much as the audience. So think about those occasions, like the obvious ones where it's consumption occasions, where you're most likely to have a beer, or how you're going to consume that in a certain ways. Is it with friends? Is it down the pub? Is it after work? What are those moments? But then also look at the moments that have a real high intensity to them, I suppose, for that audience. What are their passion points? What are their interests? Where could your product not necessarily go in and own, because you shouldn't really try and own anything with a brand or a product, but where can your product elevate a situation or a moment? One example of that, it's not with breweries, obviously, or us local breweries, but with Asahi, we worked with their Peroni Capri brand, which is kind of a Corona version, I suppose. And there were lots of festivals going on that they didn't have the pouring rights to, but that was very much where their audiences were. So one of the things that we really tried to do with them was to target the occasion of going to the festival. That's part of the experience, and how you can actually talk to them. So we looked at transport hubs, the routes from tube stations to the sites, anything in and around where people could be going, campsites, things like that. And that's where we tried to engage them with a cold can of beer, essentially, which was always really appealing on a hot summer's day. And you became part of the journey and part of the story even before you get to the festival, which ends up being more memorable as a way.
I think that's really interesting. Like, yeah, hijacking, if you can't get, behind the walls, behind the gate-kept area, actually taking a few steps back and looking at that journey leading up to it, you can just as easily be the train beer on the way there, or
Yeah, absolutely. And our model is kind of an integrated sampling model. So that by virtue means that we look at every possible way to get products into people's hands. There's three core areas, I suppose, where live is all the traditional stuff, face-to-face, festivals, offices are a big one in that as well. But then there's in-home sampling channels. So that is, you can probably work out, getting into people's homes. So that's subscription boxes, takeaways. One area that we see a lot of interest is Airbnbs and hotel locations where it's left in the fridge or left on the side as you go in. Gives you that really nice state of mind when you're going into a space. And then there's digital sampling as well, where you're not necessarily handing the product out there and then, but you're targeting really specifically, gathering people's data, and then either sending them a free product through the post or a digital coupon that they can go and redeem in a pub or a store or wherever else. And that mix allows you to really, I suppose, get into those moments without the restriction of having to be there face to face. Think about where and how and why people would want to try your product, and how that will elevate those little moments around the commute or Thursday night dinner or whatever it is that you can see could be habitual or interesting and exciting, and then place your product in as many of those as possible and test it and learn to see which ones are the ones that are actually making the most impact.
I want to come back and try and put some structure around that and using almost like a little case study shortly. But just in the back of my mind, breweries have this quite open opportunity for sampling a lot of the times, because if you walk into the pub and go, can I try a little bit of that? 9 times out of 10, you're going to get like a little thimble or a little measure of it. So there's always been that natural association with sampling if you have the confidence to do it as someone walking into the venue. do you think it's worthwhile like encouraging brewers and breweries to kind of put a little bit of messaging around their tap or on their clip to go ask for a free sample? Could that be beneficial, or does it not work that way?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think so. Because especially in the craft brewery world, there is a lot of uncertainty, and people do, en masse anyway, a lot of people do go back to what they know. So you need to try and break them out of that habit. You need to try and not shock and awe them, because that works to a certain extent, but more drive them to trial through absolute convenience. Give it to them at that time when they're most interested. So if that is when they're going in a bar and they want to try it, and there is that prompt for your beer rather than other ones, then they're definitely going to be more likely to try it. And I think you'll probably see that 8 times out of 10 they'll go on and buy their drink, as long as it tastes all right. That is a caveat, by the way. If your product tastes terrible, don't do sampling.
Yeah, probably fix that before you move into the sampling realms, isn't it? So you talked about those 3 different types of touch point. Obviously, the in-person is logical, and we touched on that a little bit, but the location-based thing. So one post that you put out I found fascinating was the Airbnb side of things, because I've done it before. I've been to different, like I've rented a property in the Cotswolds or in Lake District, and there's a bottle of local wine.
Sounds like you're doing all right for yourself, Tim.
Oh, mate, I hardly work these days. It's just all the minions that do it. This is an AI-generated me. I'm not even here. I'm in the Maldives. Anyway, how would a brewery go about like kind of getting their beers into like Airbnbs, rented venues? Because where do you start?
Well, no, it's true. I mean, we've got systematic databases with loads of different ways of doing it, but again, that's because we work on scale, as a mass approach. But from an Airbnb point of view, it's as simple as going on Airbnb and having a look at what's out there, and then contacting them directly. Hosts love it. I quite often rate an Airbnb by the goodies that you're given anyway. If there's a lovely little hamper at the beginning, then they're probably going up a score as a rating in general. So you're not going into a situation where you're asking for something for free. You're giving something for free, and you just want to be able to kind of include that as part of your own strategic thinking. But it is really as simple as, Airbnbs aren't always the answer, but thinking about where those moments are right for you and your product and your brand, and where your audience is likely to be, and then how you can get it in front of them, and making some calls, doing some research, and getting it to those places.
So, like, what other places would you consider like suitable areas for exploration? I think we talked about barbers a while ago. I think that's a really interesting one, because a lot of the time we're going like, oh, do you want a cup of tea, or do you want a coffee, or actually we've got a local beer, then you might get uptake there, but there's got to be other places as well.
Well, salons are great, and it's one that we do a lot with beers actually, and it's always surprising by the level of efficiency that comes out of the end of that actually. So we measure, and one point here is you've got to measure everything that you do. You need to be able to measure it in some way. We use incentivized surveys with QR codes, so people will scan it and then tell you what they've gone on to do, or whether they like the product, or how likely they are to purchase it, and things like that. But with the salon and barbers, we consistently see a higher claimed purchase rate after trial than almost any other channel. And it was a bit surprising at first, but when you kind of dial into it, a lot of people who go into a barbers then go to the pub. So there's almost this like immediacy of that pre-moment and that positive situation in that moment bleeding out onto an immediate environment where that product is available, and there's a real natural kind of purchasing state as well. So linking those 2 things together is an interesting one.
And you were saying about takeaways as well. Is that the same kind of approach that you take as an Airbnb? You look at certain restaurants, independent chains, and how's that?
Yes, it can be. I mean, we do that slightly different. So we work with Deliveroo. So we're their exclusive sampling partner. So anything that goes out through Deliveroo, so that's a rapid grocery delivery side, the quick 15-minute grocery orders, or their takeaways comes through us. But there's a lot of way to do it. You can, if you know local restaurant partners, go round and offer it. There's a caveat there because it's alcohol licensing laws, and you need to make sure that they're set up to do that. as well. There needs to be age verification from an alcohol point of view, but there's nothing to stop you. It's all about just looking at, I assume, like your local environments where you're most likely to be driving some of those immediate purchases on the short term. So thinking about who in that remit, and whether it's tourists, whether it's locals, what's their day-to-day and where they experience and what businesses and situations and occasions are in there. Your dog agrees. Then figuring out ways to be able to get into those spaces, and putting those processes in place, mapping it all out, deciding up front how much you've got to spend, how much you've got to give away, and what you're comfortable with, and plotting it out across the next month or quarter or year even.
Nice. And you're right, the dogs do agree, hence the rapid muting and it's still going on.
Big
now.
beer lovers.
Can't get enough of it. It really can't. Okay. I think that's really, really cool. I love the idea and the opportunities that it could present to breweries.
Yeah, I mean, there's things like, especially from a tourist point of view, and I haven't really tapped into this. I mean, this isn't brewery related, but we're doing stuff with kids clubs at the moment. Definitely not beer related.
Different market.
Yeah, but it's similar in a way, because there's a specialized market. There's a niche in terms of audience of kids-based products that you can't hand out to kids because that's irresponsible. So then you've got this real finite amount of time where you need a kid to be with their parents, and you need them to be in a situation which is not as stressful as usual, if that's possible. So where you see it a lot of the times in supermarkets, when I've been around with my son in the supermarket, I want to get in, I want to get out, I don't want to chat to people handing out little cups of something. So being able to look at those kids clubs, think like Little Kickers and Rugby Tots and other versions of that along the way, where it's a positive environment. It's kind of recommended by a figure that they respect in terms of the coaches and things like that, and it's handed out as part of the end part of it. It's given to the parent and the kid at the same time. They share it positively. Then it becomes this real powerful situation. So like translating that into a local town and tourists, for instance, or even locals, think of activities like pottery making, or axe throwing, or whatever it is that's around that. Like if you went along to them and said, hey, do you want to give one of these out at the end of your thing as a little kind of goodie bag, a lot of the time they'll say yes. And even if it gets to a stage of saying, look, for everyone you give out, I'll give you £1, then it starts to become paid media in a way that you can track and start to see, is it worth that £1 plus the bottle of beer that I handed out? How many sales have I got off the back end of it? But there's a whole host of different ways that you could approach it at a local level specifically, as well as en masse.
On the tracking level, because I know you said it's very important to, of course, track it and measure everything that's going on, but how easy is it to ensure that once the sample's handed over, you get them onto that next phase? Because it sounds like it's almost a little bit out of your control beyond please scan this QR code or fill in this form. Yeah,
I mean, you're not going to get everyone to come back, but you just got to take the data that you do get. I mean, I think in general, when we do the survey stuff, we get something between 2 and 5% of people, so real low conversion numbers. But when you're going on scale, that obviously becomes quite a sizable sample, no pun intended, to bear in mind. But it's all just about understanding what you can get and then being able to use that data as strategically as possible. So boiling it down, asking the right questions around, what did you like about that product? When are those moments when you're going to be actually consuming the product? Take it as an opportunity, and one of those rare opportunities where you got one-on-one interaction with a potential customer and your product. It's kind of like a focus group, so that it gives you that opportunity to gather as much data and insight as you can, as well as to track, did people who tried it in Airbnb do anything? Did they just drink it and have their takeaway and then move on? Or did they think, okay, well, next time I go down the pub, I'm going to try that, follow up in a meaningful way, and then take that as directional data to be able to to be able to use.
Yeah, it's because it's still on you as a brewery to you can give the sample, but then it's encouraging them to take the next step as well, isn't it? Be that if it's local tourist based, like okay, swing by the tap room and get 10% off, or buy a 4-pack online. So I guess you would always have to prompt that next step from the people you're handing it out to.
Yeah, that is important as well. What I always say is you've got to know what your objective is of any marketing campaign, right? So if sampling is all about sales, then make sure they know where they can go and buy it, ultimately. If you want to be really getting your brand out there, then you can design it in a different way. You can have that samples to be driving content, for instance, or even driving through to people leaving reviews on a certain D2C sites or retailer listings or things like that to drive you up the list. There's a variety of possible outcomes. I mean, sales is often a lot of it, but it's about having a really clear objective from the beginning as part of your marketing plan and saying, okay, this is what I want to do. I'm going to give it the sample in this environment in this way. Are you there pouring a glass out? Is it a bottle with a leaflet alongside it talking about it? And then this is the outcome that would be perfect. How am I going to drive them into a pub or a store or wherever else? How can you direct them to that? And you can use coupons and things off the back of that to, try and drive some additional intent to try that second pint. But really, you've got to just understand what you want from it ultimately, and then you can start tracking and using it more strategically and come out of it and look at it from a holistic point of view and say, what is working and what else should I be doing?
So from a strategic side of things, my mind keeps on going to like that experiential aspect of like sports clubs. I know you said rugby tots, and I extrapolated it out to, well, when we're adults, we go and watch sports and we can drink then versus the little kids. So if a brewery was saying, well, we've got a local rugby club and quite a strong following, I'm thinking of two scenarios. One where you're at the rugby club and you're already on the bar. Is it worthwhile doing sampling with people queuing up to go in? Or are they better off sampling at a place where they're not on the bar in the hope that it is kind of ingrained in their brain for future consumption?
Good question. And I think it's about those objectives. So if you're looking to drive immediate purchase, if you want to increase your rate of sale in that bar, then sampling it in the queue is a great idea. They're going to have tried it. They're going to go in. They're going to see it on the bar. Your monkey brain is essentially going to be like that one that I just tried, especially if it tastes good and you're talking about it. You're in a group and you're sharing with your peers around a good pint, and then you've got that positive sentiment throughout. Absolutely, it's a really good idea. You don't want to cannibalize sales, so I think about scale of that. Although knowing rugby players as I do, that probably won't be too much of an issue. But then if you're looking from a real brand building point of view, you should think more broadly. You should think about, again, those moments where it's going to elevate that occasion, and then people will think of your product and your brand in a really, really positive way. And that will be that kind of consideration and perception stage that can build on through to being a longer term customer potentially.
And that second route, where it's like consideration or build brand awareness, in that situation, could sampling not with your product but another brand asset be more valuable? I'm thinking that if you gave out free bucket hats or bandanas or something, that I could just see like a sea of people walking into a rugby stadium with your bucket hat on, and they don't suck the beer there, but all of a sudden everyone's like, what's this all about? Where's this from? Do you always have to sample with your product, or could you sample with other things?
Well, I mean, sampling with the product is sampling. There's lots of other stuff that's kind of additional, and often with sampling we then have stuff like that. We have mechanics and competitions and spinner wind wheels and whatever it is that kind of builds merch out and hand merch out so that it becomes a sea of whatever color you want it to be, and that's great from a branding point of view. But it's not sampling as such. Sampling really is about the product in itself, but those bolt-ons, and it starts to become a bit more experiential, right? Where you're doing something and you're giving something away, and people are in that moment, and that is a part of sampling. Experiential sampling can be anything from a spin and win wheel on the street to full scale stage activation at a festival that's giving you product at the same time and creating that environment and those moments rather than elevating them. And it's all just scalable. So it's just looking at what is available and what you want out of it again, without sounding too much like a broken record.
No, and as soon as I talked about it, I was like, Tim, you're an idiot. That's not sampling. That's just giving away product. You can't sample a bucket hat unless your products are bucket hats. Anyway, let's get back to value-based stuff. Could you provide like a high-level recommendation for maybe a small brewery trying to attract tourist trade versus a brewery that might be trying to pull in more online sales and direct consumer stuff? Like how would they differ and what would they look like without just giving away all the
well, I mean, the locality is a big part of it, isn't it? So if you're looking at tourist trades, you know where you're going to be going. Those can be much more physical environments. You can look at the pottery shed or the local tourist attractions, as you will. I'm from the Isle of Wight, so I'm thinking like beaches and dinosaur museums and things like that, but everywhere is different, and really leaning into that and trying to capture those guys, understanding again where you want them to go afterwards. Where is that pub that they're likely to go into? Where is the local shop or local co-op that has your brands listed, and really build into those moments and leverage that a little bit. From a D2C point of view, the benefit you have is they could come from anywhere. Your customers could be anywhere in the country, but it makes it more difficult in terms of being able to hand them a physical product. So that's when things like the in-home stuff comes into its own, where you can hand it out and direct them with a link to go to that site. And digital sampling is even more powerful in a way where you can target them in the same way that you would with a normal marketing campaign, but target the specific person that you want, send them a sample in some guise. And again, that could be a digital coupon. So they could go down to their local bar or their local shop or even on your site and get something to get them into that process. I'd always recommend doing it for free the first time, by the way. Like, get rid of your shipping fees as a first starter, because there's always the people who go through that shipping piece are usually people that are quite likely to have bought your product anyway. If you want to get past that and new customers, then just remove any barriers. But by doing that, you then get them to try it, and then you get them in the system. The digital thing means that you've got a workflow. You can make it programmatic, and you can keep them coming back and keep pushing out different types of comms to be able to talk to them.
Yeah, that's really nice. I've had various guests come in and we talk about how you secure email address for future marketing, kind of like take them on a journey. And so it's another logical move, if not with a bit of financial investment, to actually get it shipped out and packaged up nicely.
Yeah.
One thing that we haven't really talked about is like volume, because I'd imagine that can be make or break, not only from the sampling side of things, but from a brewery side of things. Because if you go, oh yeah, it's just a couple of thousand bottles, then you're going to have a lot of listeners going, I ain't doing it. It's not happening. What's the minimum, and then what's probably advised for a small indie brewery?
More than one, I'd say. But that it's an impossible question to answer that one, to be honest. It's really, I wouldn't say to anyone like you have to do 2,000 or 50,000 or whatever it is. Sampling does work, and it really just depends on your scale and your own capacities and budgets and whatever else. So by all means, start small. Think, if you've got a box or a crate that is going out of date soon or something like that, think, how can I use this in a really meaningful way without just putting a discount on it? What could I do, and where could I go, and how could I engage with people, and then test it, and then see what has happened out of the back of that, and just think of it as much as you would think about any of your other marketing channels. What cost is that to me, and then how much is coming out at the end of it.
Can you share some of the success stories? Because I'm really interested to know, like, what kind of returns, when done properly, like businesses could expect from sampling.
Sure, I'm going to have to get my portal up here because I don't have all the stats to my hand.
You don't remember all the numbers off the top of your head, Rich? Come on, man.
I know. What am I talking about? So, I mean, one of the most, I mean, we talked about Asahi in general, and we worked on a multi-brand campaign with those a couple of years ago, where it was Peroni Capri, Asahi Superdry 00, and Peroni 00 as well. And it was a nice big campaign where we looked across lots and lots of different channels, including salons and the Airbnbs and on-trade digital stuff and things like that. But when I look at the sales metrics on that one, on average, we saw a claimed purchase rate. So this is the survey and saying, you know, since trying your thing, have you bought it? Yes or no? So that was 30%. So a third of all people who tried a product went on and bought it. And that gave us a return on investment of 2.7 to 1. So for every £1 spent, you get £2.70 back in revenue, bear in mind. So we're not talking profits here. But it shows you that if done well, you can really look at driving value that comes out at the end of it. It doesn't need to be a loss leader. But equally, you should look at it appropriately and not assume that it's going to get you money in your bank straight away. It is marketing ultimately, and we all do the marketing things to try and drive sales ultimately, but it's a complex beast.
So if there are brewery owners who are listening going, yeah, actually, we've got a couple of boxes that we could probably spend, like any tools or platforms or systems that you recommend they look into to just make the job of measuring it and tracking it that little bit easier?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a survey. Like, it's a very simplest way of doing it. I mean, try and get your sales data from wherever it's going to as well lined up, so you know you can start seeing if there's any spikes and trackability around different things. Initially, I try and do one channel at a time because that makes it much easier to measure. You can see what's it done, has it had effect on sales, and do something else the next week. Try and make it have as much parity as possible. But apart from that, it's get a survey set up. Could be on Typeform, could be on SurveyMonkey, whatever works for you. And then the way that we do it is alongside a sample, we have a leaflet with product information and a QR code saying, scan here for your chance to win X. That shouldn't be product related, I'd say. Make that cash prize. We usually see something around the 250 quid mark works well as an incentive, but you only give away one, mind you, so it's, you know, not too bad. And then people will scan it, fill in the survey as you need to. Make sure you think about the answers that you want, you know, things about your product, things about those consumer insight questions, recommendations. Have people done that? Have people gone on to buy it? How likely they are to buy it? Questions around that. And set it up. And then all you need to do is go onto the survey portal and check the results.
And like, what's a recommended kind of like time frame for something like that? You know, is it you do it over a week or is it a month to get a good amount of data?
So in terms of the actual survey, I'd leave it open for 4 weeks at least. Give people enough chance to go and execute some sort of action, but it really depends on the type of channel as well. You know, there are some like Airbnbs where people stay there for a week or a weekend at least. So if you give a box to a host, for instance, and they can put a couple of bottles out for every person that comes in, and then that might last them a month or a couple of months or however long. So bear in mind how long it's actually going to take to execute. Whereas if you just go down to somewhere that has high footfall, like a tourist attraction, for instance, then you could get rid of 1,000 in a day, probably. So, you know, they've got different timescales as well. So just vary it based on that.
Yeah. Okay. Rich, I honestly can't thank you enough for this. There have been so many aha moments for me, and
no worries.
After this, yeah, there's so much to consider, but I love the idea of just getting in the mindset of your target consumer, what the goal is, and kind of track that journey and how you can integrate into those moments, those experiences. What I like to ask most of my guests at the end of these chats is, you sat in a bar or you sat at a pub, and turns out you sat next to a brewery owner. And he's like, oh, well, I'd love to chat, mate, but my cab's just like 2 minutes away. But like, yeah, like, why bother? Like, what is the kind of the thing that you would like quickly impart on that brewery owner about sampling in the hope that they give it a go?
I guess the question I'd ask them is like, would you be more likely to buy something if you've tasted it? If you've tried it, would you be more likely to buy it? The answer is usually yes. And then it's just saying, okay, well, when you're sampling, it's not just about who you're sampling. It's about when and where you're talking to them, when and where those moments are. And really a few hundred samples done in a targeted and considered way can do more than 1,000 samples given out en masse. So you can start this small and you can think about how you want to do it and what you want to get out of it. But the more considered you are in your approach and the more savvy you are about it in terms of talking to people and using your networks as a business owner, then the more you'll get out of it ultimately. And measure. Otherwise it is free stock.
True. Rich, again, my man, thank you so much. If people are interested and want to find out a little bit more about what you're doing with Flavor, or indeed just pick your brains a little bit more in the hope that you provide even more free value, where should they go? Where should they find you?
So flavorsampling.com. It's flavor spelt without the U, the America way. Is probably the best place to go to see anything, or just tap me up on LinkedIn.
Wicked. Well, everyone who's been listening, thank you so much for your time. Even if you're listening in the future, yes, I'm talking to you from the past. Thank you very much for tuning in. Stay tuned. Still loads more amazing guests coming up over the next couple of weeks. But once again, Rich, thank you so much. Everyone, go find him. He's on LinkedIn. Go check out the website. I'll put all the notes in the comments. But until then, you rock. Bye-bye. That's a wrap on this week's episode of Branding for Breweries. If you got something great from it, hit follow, like, and subscribe on your favorite streaming app. Or even better, leave a review, share it with your brewery pals, or get in touch, because I want to chat to you. Rock on!